Hello, I'm Liz Van Vliet, and welcome to the Assist with Impact podcast. Join me as I explore the competencies and capabilities that allow you to assist with impact. I'll be sharing practical tips, strategies, and insights that will help you move beyond what I call the order taker zone and be that little hinge that can swing big doors. If you're ready to be more proactive and have more impact in your role, then this is the place for you. Let's get started with the episode. This is a very special week in my life because it was 10 years ago that I scratched a very special itch. It was the itch that I scratched that turned my world and my entire family's world upside down. It was the itch under my armpit that ended up having me go off to the doctors, and by the end of this week, 10 years ago, be diagnosed with not just one, but two forms of breast cancer. So this is a very special week because it marks, and I'm just putting my Post-it up so I can not ramble on and lose track of what I want to talk about in this particular video today. So it marks 10 years ago that I scratched that itch that turned my world and the world of my family, my husband and my three gorgeous daughters, Kate, who at the time was in year 7, Abby, who at the time was in year 5, and Tessa, who at the time was in kindergarten or first year of primary school. And it turned our world upside down in that moment. But we're not here in this moment, 10 years on, to dwell on that moment of turning our world upside down. What I want to do this week is celebrate the fact that I am here 10 years later. And I am very happy to be here 10 years later. But it would be remiss of me to let this very special milestone go past without commemorating it. And so this coming few days, I'm going to be doing a video every day, because that moment 10 years ago and my breast cancer experience has been so formative in terms of what I'm doing now and the way it transformed my life. Not just in terms of my family's journey and the road that we were on as a family, but the road that I was on as a person, both positively and negatively. And I want to share that for you because there are so many people that don't get to this milestone, this 10-year milestone. So the fact that I'm able to be here today means that I do have that voice, and I want to be able to share with you and in my own way educate you about what it looks like to be living with a cancer diagnosis 10 years on. So this week is all about celebrating, and surprise, surprise, I don't think my family even knows that that is this milestone this week, because I have not made any sort of big deal about it. So when they're watching this video, it'll probably be the first time they're actually even aware that that is what this week is actually, that the date is significant. So, spoiler alert, guys. 10 years ago, we took that off-ramp onto what I have now become known for referring to it as Breast Cancer Highway. And if you've been following along on the Liz Van Vliet story for a while, you will know that behind me over here is a book that I wrote about my experience a few years ago. And on that journey, there have been potholes and obstacles. There have been sights and scenery. There have been passengers, and I've named a few already. There have been navigators. There have been co-pilots. There have been, fly in, fly out visitors along the way, very special people. And I'm going to talk about some of those people over the next few days. There's also been baggage that I took along when I started on this journey, and baggage that I picked up along the way and realized that it was weighing me down. And it's things like that that have made me able to, I feel, do what I'm doing now in my professional life, but also be able to overcome challenges and obstacles that continue to come up in my personal life because of having gone through that experience navigating what I call my treatment highway, my recovery highway, and my survivor highway, because I'm still on survivor highway and I'm very grateful to that. So throughout these next few days, for the rest of this week, I'm going to be sharing the good and the bad, the gratitude and some of the grim, because it's really important to me, as I said, that as a breast cancer survivor, I can give voice to some of those realities, that it's really important that we get that message out so that it's not just all that pink ribbon and focusing on just that message that can be not necessarily realistic in terms of the experience of cancer survivors, not just breast cancer survivors, but all cancer survivors. And I'd love it if you could follow along over the next few days to hear my story over the last 10 years of navigating my breast cancer highway experience over the last 10 years. But most importantly, for you to hear me celebrate the fact that I've reached this milestone and that I'm very happy to be here 10 years on. What I wanted to do was really just give you a little bit of background about my experience of breast cancer. And I wanted to do that by way of reading a little excerpt from the speech that I gave when I published my book, which is over here. And if you're not familiar with it, my book was called and is called Coming Home from Breast Cancerville. And my book was published a few years ago now. It was actually published the year before the pandemic, the year, in actual fact, the year that I turned 50. That's giving you a little bit of an idea of how old I am. But what I wanted to do was read you not my whole speech from that book launch, but a little bit of an excerpt of it. So, like most people, I believed that the hardest time for someone that dealing with breast cancer is the treatment phase, that there is a start and a logical end. But breast cancer is not like that. What I found instead is that just when people are congratulating you on being a survivor and having got through it, you are actually anything but home. In fact, you're on a different journey, a different highway, trying to navigate yourself to what is in reality a new home in a location that is still unclear. My experience is that there are 3 stages to this road trip. There is treatment highway, which in my case was grim in the most epic ways possible. Allergic reactions to chemotherapy, ever-present nausea that meant I lost 20 kilos and spent nearly 50 nights in hospital, including the intensive care unit. The Christmas and New Year of 2014 was spent in hospital attached to a drip. I developed an infection and ended up in ICU. A total of 3 surgeries, the final involving 13 hours on the table and another 13 days in hospital. It's little wonder that as my hair grew back and I regained weight, I was assured that I was amazing and a survivor. But the truth was that I felt anything but a survivor. What I was what I call recovery highway. I reached a point where I genuinely felt it would have been better if I had not survived. I felt broken, and worse, I felt like a fraud. I hadn't bounced back, and I found myself feeling isolated and ashamed. The narrative that breast cancer survivors are confronted with is that we are meant to come out the other side of treatment, triumphant and transformed by the experience. These are the stories that the media pushes, and we all latch onto them because we want the happy ending, and the alternative to not coming out the other side is too horrible to contemplate. I get that. But that doesn't do justice to the real and lived experience of many of the 91% of people who survive breast cancer, who are maimed and disabled by their surgery, who struggle with the side effects of medications that exacerbate the symptoms of menopause and affect every aspect of their lives, who are fearful and anxious and dealing with PTSD, who are trying to support partners and children who have also been traumatized by their experience. Like me, they don't identify as survivors, and they're struggling to find their way onto what I call survivor highway. As humans, it's natural that we want to tie things up with a bow, to imagine a neat ending to the awful experience of breast cancer. It's understandable to assume that the fresh follicles and perky skin post-treatment is an indicator that all is well in the world of that friend, work colleague, or family member. But I'm asking you not to make that assumption. I'm encouraging you to be aware that nothing is ever back to normal. And this can be a message that survivors feel it's not okay and acceptable to give voice to. So instead, we put up a facade, we put on our mask, and we create an illusion that we're okay when in fact we're not. We smile and wave. When I started writing my book, I hadn't processed the experience. I had the vision that I'd been on a road trip to destination Breast Cancerville and that I was on the return journey. There was an outward leg and there was a return leg. The return leg was giving me some grief, but eventually I was going to find my way back home. What I didn't realize at the time was that the home that I'd left, the one that I'd left, wasn't there anymore. I had to accept that I was different, that my life was different. And that took time, quite a bit of time. My road trip over the last 10 years has been all about discovery, self-discovery, and self-acceptance. But I promised you that I would give you the grateful and the grim. That's enough for one day. Bottom line is that breast cancer and cancer of any description takes prisoners. And for me to still be standing after 10 years, it didn't happen without the support of my husband and my beautiful girls and wonderful friends and family. Ever since I recovered from breast cancer and found myself in this new phase of my life on Survivor Highway, which coincidentally was when I found myself stepping into the role of an executive assistant, supporting a wonderful executive who had full confidence that despite never having done the job before, I would be able to be his strategic partner. And I thank him for that confidence that he showed in me. And I, always being curious and a self-directed learner, did my utmost to learn what it would take to become what I wanted to be, which was to be that strategic partner. And it was in the process of doing that that I started my podcast, which when it first was released was called Being Indispensable. And when I first started presenting and speaking to executive assistant audiences, I used the word serendipity. And I love that word because that word really speaks to what's in my heart and the fact that had it not been for finding that lump 10 years ago, I would never have found myself on the road that I ultimately did find myself on, which was becoming an executive assistant and working for that wonderful executive who I will tag in this post, and he knows who he is. And if you've listened to the podcast, you've heard him on the podcast. But the message that I want to convey to you is that, as I said in part 2 of my little video series, we are human beings. We are not human doings. And the reality is that because we are human beings, we're messy. And life is messy and life is mucky. And that means that breast cancer or some other illness can strike at any time. Things happen and we can't control what happens to us. So my desire to be indispensable to my executive was ultimately not realistic, because the reality was that my health ended up meaning that I had to step away from the role. But again, serendipity showed its, that word came up again. And it was because I had had the opportunity to work as an executive assistant that I actually got to see that there was this perfect intersection of my skills and talents in terms of my interpersonal skills, my communication skills, my business acumen, my commercial acumen, all of the skills that I had built up over my, at that point, 25-year plus sales and marketing career that I took for granted. But so many assistants were hungry for the sort of knowledge and expertise that I was able to impart to them through my little podcast. And out of that grew a business. And it was because I could see that hunger and I could see that there was that opportunity there in the assistant community for the sort of expertise that I could bring to the table, that meant that I then went and set up my business, focusing specifically on those power skills that really supercharge your ability to support your executive and be that strategic partner that I know you so want to be. So that word, serendipity. But do you know, it actually also took confidence. And if you've watched part 2, particularly part 2 of my video, or even part 1, you'll know that that's the other thing I really feel this last 10 years have taught me, is that confidence is something that we have to remind ourselves constantly. Some of us, not all of us, but for some of us, confidence doesn't come naturally. And I can relate to that because that's something that I have very much lived over this past 10 years. And in my experience, coming out the other side of my treatment onto recovery highway, I did not feel confident in my own abilities. And again, that's where that word serendipity comes in. That through doing what I do and working with assistants and the assistant community through the various ways that I do that, I have been able to be affirmed in terms of my skills and capabilities. And that's been a wonderful thing. So I would say to you to never think that confidence is a muscle that you can't develop, and to believe in yourself and your own ability to improve your confidence, no matter how you might be feeling on any given day. Because as somebody that's gone through what I've gone through in the last 10 years, I can tell you that that is something that has been a really key part of this 10-year journey that I've been on. So I wanted to finish this week off in terms of my LinkedIn posts with a shout out to all of the wonderful assistants that I have had the absolute pleasure and delight of coming in contact with. And I want to just give that word serendipity one more whirl, because had it not been for this breast cancer diagnosis, I would have been on a different trajectory. I would have continued on my different trajectory. And I think I would have been not as fulfilled. I know I would not have. So thank you. And it's a pleasure to have met you. Thanks for listening to today's show. I hope you enjoyed it. If you'd like to see the show notes, head over to my website. It would be great if you haven't already done so. If you enjoyed the show, if you could kindly go to iTunes and leave a review. It helps other people find the show. Thanks for listening and have a great week.